So I've done two videos now about automation and artificial intelligence, and I focused my discussion on the logistics sector, discussing trucking firstly and then warehousing. So what is the bottom line that we need to learn from this? The real question that needs to be applied to every sector, if you are wondering whether whatever sector, choose a job that you're thinking of and you're worried about that you are doing this job, it's going to be lost to automation and artificial intelligence, which I'm using here interchangeably, even though they are not interchangeable, but for our purposes, it's fine. The question that you need to ask yourself is this job linear? Is it linear? Or is it linearizable? Linearization is a big process part of what we do in chemical engineering in trying to linearize processes for the better optimization of processes and increased productivity and increased profitability. And if a process is not linear and is not linearizable, then that process can't be automated. Or if we say can't be automated, meaning it can't be automated or it will be very difficult to automate it. So for instance, if we stick to the issue of transportation, for instance, and we ask ourselves this question, here are two examples. Bus drivers, train drivers, or I don't know if they're called drivers, people who drive trains, and truck drivers. Which one of these three jobs can be automated? I can tell you now that the ones that would be the most difficult to automate would be truck drivers because of the difficulty of linearizing the process of delivering goods, especially off-road truck driving. Even on-road truck driving is incredibly difficult to linearize and hence incredibly difficult to automate. But when it comes to buses, especially in a city like any city in the world that has dedicated lanes for buses, the linearization of such a process is doable, especially if you can guarantee that the traffic lights on that route will always be working. If the traffic lights will always be working and you have a dedicated bus route, because often bus routes are very dedicated. It starts from point A to point B or from point A to point B, C, and D in the seat. There is no deviation in the route. If there is no deviation in the route, for instance in a bus, the route is the same all the time. The times are the same all the time. You can guarantee that the traffic lights will always work. You can guarantee that these buses have functioning motion sensing in terms of they can sense if there's a person or there's something that they can bump into, which is something that is easily programmable. And you have ready to ease signage, then bus drivers could possibly be replaced by automation. But even in this particular instance, it is incredibly difficult because most cities in the world cannot guarantee that traffic lights will always work. It is incredibly difficult to guarantee that because whether it's power outages or bad weather or vandalism of any kind in South Africa, cable theft and things like that, it becomes very difficult to guarantee that traffic lights will always work. So, but also it's incredibly difficult to predict when will a bus break down in the middle of a route. And when a bus breaks down in the middle of the route, it might be incredibly difficult to manage that if you don't have a driver. But I can see bus drivers being replaced by autonomous and self-driving buses more so than I can see truck drivers being replaced, because the linearization process of truck driving is a lot more complicated and close to impossible. Same can be said about trains. Trains can be automated. Trains are, by their very nature, they are linearized and linearizable. Therefore, trains can be automated to the point where you don't need a coach driver or a train driver. So that's the test that you need to apply to any sector. It's the same situation in terms of in restaurants, in terms of why it is easy to automate making orders, but it is incredibly difficult to automate the actual cooking of the food. The processes, these two things have completely different processes with different linearization challenges, making the automation of making an order much more easier to do than the automation of actually cooking of the food. Because even the preparation of ingredients in the kitchen at the back is a lot more difficult to linearize compared to the issue of making orders in a autonomous and robotic fashion. So that's so you can choose any sector, any job, and just apply the question of, can this be linearized? Is it linear, and can it be linearized? This is one of the reasons why doctors, for instance, will not lose their jobs to automation. Because the process of diagnosing patients, doing operations, because surgeons in particular, there's just no way of linearizing the process of doing an operation, because so many things often go wrong in an operation that require active human judgment, making the process hard or impossible to linearize. So you can think of many jobs that require active human judgment. Those jobs would be very difficult to replace. And that include jobs like engineering, rail engineering, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, electronics, metallurgy, nuclear engineers. All of those jobs will be very, very difficult to automate, because linearizing those tasks is linearizing problem solving is very difficult. Even if you are putting it to, I always find it very weird when someone says, when I'm telling someone something that I know from my experience in the engineering space, and they tell me what they know because they asked ChatGPT or they ask some other AI. It's very funny, like Grok. So, a lot of the times it's people who are telling me, I asked Grok and Grok said this, which basically means you don't know anything about what I'm talking about. You don't know a damn thing about it. Yeah. So if you are concerned about the future viability of your particular job, the answer to that question would be, is your job linear? Does it consist of repetitive actions, or actions that can be modeled into repetitive actions? Even if your job, it's not a continuous repetitive action, but it is stepwise. But if it is stepwise but repetitive, therefore it can, within certain levels of accuracy, be linearized. That's really like the crux of the matter, because there's a big part of in the scientific space where we study the linearization of nonlinear systems using computational methods and relying mostly on numerical methods. So so this is a big field where scientists and engineers take nonlinear complex systems and try to make them linear, for the sake of actually they can be modeled into some sequential process. So a lot of processes who are not necessarily linear, they can be approximated into a linear process and hence reduce cost, increase profitability, and increase productivity. So there's also that. But with that said, apply that thinking, apply this question to any sector that you want to find out about whether these jobs will be lost or not to automation. Cheers.